Well, first of all, let me thank you for joining us this morning, because I know you have no shortage of things on your list to do. But this morning, very important for me to share with you my view and actually to listen to you as well, your perspective. I took over as Commandant a little over a month ago, and a couple days later, we published planning guidance on where we thought the Marine Corps needed to go. And although you may not have had a chance to read it, that planning guidance is very clear on the role of the Indo-Pacific region and the Marine Corps' role in that region. This is the most consequential region for us. Our alliance with Japan is an essential part of that. And whenever you take over a role like the Commandant or Sergeant Major, you begin to think where you're going to travel first. To go see your Marines and to go see your partners. For us, this was an easy decision. We came to this region, to Japan and Korea first, for very, very strong reasons. First, of course, to see the Marines and to tell them what we expect of them and to listen to them. But second, also to meet with our partners, our allies, and understand the views from where they sit, and share with them our priorities as well. So that's why we're here. We'll be here today. We'll go down to Okinawa and then on to Korea, and that's a very good first swing for us. Yesterday had a very good day with government leaders in Tokyo here and the Self-Defense Force leadership as well, to listen to each one of their views and share with them the U.S. Marine Corps view of how we can be better partners, better players in this alliance. So a great day yesterday. And then last night, a really rare opportunity because you all are probably familiar. There are Japanese officers and enlisted self-defense force members who attend our professional military education schools, and we send ours to yours. Well, last night, the folks here arranged a get-together for all those who had attended U.S. military schools before. So there were probably 40, sure, maybe more, 40 or 45 people there last night. It was like a homecoming collection because all of them had attended our schools. We knew them, and some of them 10, 12, 14 years ago that are now generals and senior leaders. And one in particular, and then we'll move ahead, really caught my attention was there were two self-defense force members that went to school in Okinawa, to the corporal's course in Okinawa probably 6, 7 years ago. One of them now is a staff sergeant and one of them is a lieutenant. And to listen to their experience of how we learn about each other's, not just how we operate as a military, but culturally, incredible, powerful story they had to tell. And they're still, of course, growing in the self-defense force here, so it was really great last night. And then again, today we'll head down to Okinawa. We'll meet with Marines down there and the leaders down there, and then on to Korea. And then I'll just finish up with my view of where things are from a Marine Corps leader perspective. My first experience in this region was in 1982. It was my first deployment. I was a lieutenant, and I probably did not understand what the meaning of alliance really meant, what partners and allies, what that really meant. I just came here with my unit, like all young leaders do. And over the past, I would just tell you, over the past 36, 37 years, I have really grown to appreciate and a deeper understanding of the meaning of allies and partners firsthand. Is what, at my level. There's a level above me, but at my level, where we are in military-wise, really amazing for me to watch that development over more than 3 decades. It is incredibly strong. We have challenges like all other families, partners do, and we talk about them openly and we work those issues out. It's really, for me, rewarding to see a growth over 35, 36 years. Not my first trip here. Probably have spent 7 or 8 years in total in this region, but still always more to learn. So this trip is as much about learning as anything else. But Sergeant Major and I are really happy to spend time with you this morning. So with that, what I thought I'd do is open it up and see what direction you want to go with a comment or a question or just a discussion you want to have, and start wherever you want to begin. Sir.
Thank you, General, for giving us this opportunity. My first question, I would like to know about the current situation of the plan of the marine realignment from Okinawa to the Asia-Pacific region, Island. So could you elaborate on the current status of the plan and the possible timelines for the implementation of the realignment plan?
Thank you for the question. We talked some about this yesterday. It won't surprise you, with leaders throughout a series of meetings. I spent 2 years as the commander of all the Marines in the Pacific, so I'm very familiar with especially the last 3 or 4 years of progress, having multiple trips to Guam and to Okinawa to watch the progress. First, I will say, from my perspective, very solid progress and great resolve from the Japanese leaders here in Tokyo to make sure that the Futema replacement facility and the rest of the arrangements moved ahead. And I thought that kind of leadership and that kind of resolve was remarkable. It still is, and it's a big reason for why it's where it is today. I think the progress is solid. We'll go down to Okinawa to see it. I've been to Guam, again, multiple times, seen the construction there. In fact, I met your Minister of Defense there about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. Flew from Hawaii and met her in Guam so that we could walk through the facilities and see the construction. I think it's all progressing very well. I think the timeline, as published in the early 2020s to begin the movement, is all on track. There will still be challenges, but I'm satisfied that things are moving in the right direction. And again, the resolve, I think, of the administration here is the biggest reason for that.
What we knew from the news report from Guam is that the CMAC, the part of the CMAC tools will be transferred to Guam from late 2024 or early 2025. Is that correct?
That's the plan. And the construction awards of contract and the construction itself is making good progress over the last 2 years. Still more work to do on the environmental part and the bidding and awarding of subsequent contracts for buildings there, but so far all is on track.
So you mean that means late 2024 or early 2025? Which one is?
I don't know yet. It's a function of the contracts themselves and the progress on the construction and working out whatever remaining environmental issues there are. It's too early to tell an exact time frame because there's too many variables right now between now and then. But the overall schedule remains on track, and I'm satisfied with the progress. Yes, sir. Sir.
Thanks for making the time to
You bet.
meet us this morning. You're here as tensions with Japan and Korea are at a low ebb over the labor, wartime labor issue. South Korea has indicated it may not renew GSOMIA intelligence sharing agreement. If that is not renewed, if that agreement disappears, what is the kind of impact in the way that the US Marines and the US military generally operates with Japan and South Korea, and how would you tackle that if that was the case?
I know the issue you're speaking of. I'm confident that the people who work at levels outside the military on the negotiations and the dialogue to work their way through that friction, the right people are talking. For myself, my obligation to the Secretary of Defense on our side is to make sure we have forces that are prepared to defend and to deter malign behavior. So from my perspective, we have a common focus on what we know, what we accept are threats, and we all acknowledge who they are. From a purely military perspective, the more we can share information between countries, between forces, obviously is a very good thing from a purely military perspective. The policy issues, the details of that negotiation that you're speaking of, I think I'm hopeful will get worked out. But from a military perspective, it's important to be able to share information because each country has information that the other ones will need. And the ability to move that is very important from a military perspective. So I'm optimistic it'll get worked out.
So you're not expecting that agreement to disappear?
I don't know. We'll see where the discussions take. All I know is from my perspective, it's a better world when we can, between allies, between partners, when we can share information and share intelligence. It's a much better operation when that happens.
Could you kind of possibly give like something more concrete in terms of if the agreement's not there, what you'd have to do in terms of the way you operate?
I don't want to speculate. I know what you're asking, but I don't want to speculate on like Plan B or Plan C. There are multiple levels of moving information that have grown over the years. I'm sure if things were not able to work out, we'd find a way to share what we can with our partners and allies. I'm hopeful, optimistic that it'll get worked out, but I don't want to speculate on what backup plans there might be. In our fleet marine forces, which are the forces that are operational, we have 3 Marine Expeditionary Forces around the world. 2 of them in the United States, 1 of them here. So the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force that's headquartered in Okinawa is roughly 1/3 of our combat strength. The 1st Marine Expeditionary Force that's based in California is also assigned to the Indo-Pacific commander. So altogether you have 2/3 of the Marine forces assigned to this region. So to anchor your point on how important it is, you put your forces where it matters. This is 2/3 of the United States Marine Corps Fleet Marine Force in the Indo-Pacific, assigned to the Indo-Pacific. Geographically, to get at your point, absolutely it matters. And I would just highlight for you perhaps 2 lenses to look through. One is the operational lens, and one is a deterrent posture lens. But they're related. From a deterrent aspect, you want to position your forces and have very credible, trained, ready forces that will convince a potential adversary to change their mind, change their calculus, not take another step. And so our presence as partners here in Japan and Korea and in different countries in this region, where we are physically, geographically matters from a deterrence aspect. And this strategy that both our nations have is the foundational element is deterrence. The second part, though, is if a potential adversary does decide to take another step, you have to be in position to move then. We never plan that we'll have long time to get ready, long time to move forces. So we have to have forward naval expeditionary forces in locations where our 2 nations can use them if they need to try to contain a crisis, try to prevent a crisis from growing. That means you have to be ready and you have to be in position. So the locations, to your point, the geography matters. Being in position to deter matters. And also being in a position where with your partners and allies you can respond quickly if you need to so that a problem doesn't grow also matters. It is essential. There is no plan for the Marine Corps to move backwards, just to address your last point.
And is there any plan or desire for the host nations to contribute more to your presence here, or is your presence here, the way you speak about it is about the region, not just specifically about Japan and Korea, which makes me think that your reason for being here is not just to protect Japan or protect Korea, but rather to have a strategic deterrent presence in the region. So almost seems like the host nations are not just, you're not here just to protect the host nations.
Not
So-
just, no.
So there is a broader strategic.
Absolutely,
reason.
yes.
So is there a reason why either of the host nations need to contribute more to your presence here?
I think if you look at from a couple different lenses, the advancements that, just take one, the Japanese Self-Defense Force has made in terms of their organization and stand-up of the Rapid Deployment Brigade, the equipment, the aircraft that they're buying and fielding, all for a reason, so that they can be a stronger self-defense force and also partner better with the U.S. The recent decision that we spoke of yesterday of the procurement, the purchase of F-35Bs, another tremendous example of how it's going to be so easy for us to partner with them, because like aircraft, same training, same capabilities. This is what alliance, in other words, back to my sort of conversation in General Mahoney's about alliance at our level, means our F-35s can fly together, operate together as a single unit when we need to. Oh, the balance of who contributes more is a matter for someone else to negotiate, someone else to discuss. My job, General Mahoney's job, is to make sure our forces can operate alongside and always have overmatch over a potential adversary. And I think the organization and the structure and the equipment that the self-defense force that Japan is moving towards is the best visible example of that.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Thank you, General. My name is Sato from Asahi newspaper.
Yes, sir.
Go back to the relationship between Japan and OK.
Mm.
My colleague pointed out before, the two countries' relationship is really bad right now. Meanwhile, it seems that China, Russia, and North Korea enjoy current situation and try to drive the wedge between two countries, like such as Russia's military aircraft violated the airspace around Takeshima or Dr. Island.
Yes.
And China and Russia conducted a joint exercise using their bombers. And my question is, from U.S. Strategic perspective, how do you concern the current Japan-ROK relation?
The relationship between the ROK and Japan obviously is something that those two countries, your two countries, will address. From my perspective, my focus is to make sure that we can build capability and build capacity with both. And the overarching reason for that is both of us have all three have a common view of what the major threats are in the near term and the long term in this region. In other words, there are differences. That's not uncommon. But the common point, my focus, is the common threat. And all three agree what the near-term threat is, and you highlighted it from North Korea, and the long-term strategic threat to stability in this region and the world is China. All three of us agree on that. So my priority, make sure that the forces that we have out here are trained to the highest degree we can have, that they're interoperable with both countries' militaries, both countries' defense forces, so that we can deter best case. And if an adversary chooses not to behave in a manner that our nations expect, then we're ready to respond. The rest is for diplomats, for other folks to work out.
If I may.
Sir,
Kind of miss the opportunity.
now jump in. Absolutely.
My name is Yoshinawa from Kyoto News. Thanks for this opportunity.
You bet.
And let me get back to force alignment. I remember Mr. Harry Harris when he was a Patton commander. 2 or 3 years ago, he testified the relocation from Futenma to Henoko will happen around 2025, I think. Has it been changed in the plan? Or could it be delayed? What is your plan on when do you expect this to happen?
Well, that's contingent on the construction of the replacement facility, as you mentioned.
And what about, could it be the transfer from Okinawa to Guam? Could it be delayed if the relocation is delayed?
I think both the consolidation of forces and relocation within Guam or within Okinawa and the shift of forces to Guam, of course, both are two different but related issues, as you know, as you're stated. In both cases, they rely on construction progress in Guam and in Honoko. I don't see any change yet to the timeline, but it's too early to predict a month or a portion of a year when things might happen because there's too many variables right now to forecast. I can't speculate on things that haven't happened yet. I know the steps, I know the procedures. We'll see how it plays out. But so far, things are on schedule from where I sit.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you so much for taking your time. And thank you for your service. I have one question regarding your Commandant's planning guide. I think you mentioned that you prioritize focus on China's BRI and malign activities in the East and South China Seas. You also mentioned in your report that your focus, your forces lack the required capabilities to deter China and persist in a contested space to facilitate sea denial.
Right.
And could you elaborate on the current situation in the area, and would you make the same recommendation to the Japanese forces?
I won't make a recommendation to the Japanese forces. What I will do, obviously, is share the view of the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and Secretary Spencer, I think, is very clear as well. The areas that are a problem for the U.S. in regards to China's expansion is largely their methods. Their militarization of features in the South China Sea that goes against the UNCLOS should not go unchallenged. That's the type of behavior that is outside of norms that are accepted in this region and destabilize the region. The coercion, economic, diplomatic coercion of countries in the Indo-Pacific is not what Japan, Korea, the U.S. would expect to see. It's not acceptable behavior. The free and open part that both of our countries speak of, when a country violates the norms of behavior and puts other countries in a position where they don't have freedom to travel, they don't have freedom to fly, don't have freedom to sail, that's not acceptable. We have to be willing to push back. Well, for the U.S. Marine Corps, that means having an amphibious capability that's credible and positioned in the right places and trained to a very high standard and partnered with units like the Amphibious Rapid Deployment Brigade that have a similar sort of a role in expeditionary and very flexible forces that fight, able to operate from the sea.
I think you also mentioned about long-range missiles in the area and the ability to deter that.
Right.
Can you please elaborate on that aspect of your report as well?
There's a fair amount of, and rightfully so, reporting and focus on the numbers and range of Chinese long-range weapon systems. That's a concern. And I think best offset by an alliance of very strong partners in a region. We have to not accept ever an advantage by an adversary in any regard. So for us, that means developing the capabilities as part of a naval force, the Marine Corps plus the Navy, to put at risk a potential adversary's capabilities wherever that is around the world. And that, to get to that point, means long-range precision fires that can ensure that places where all of our vessels need to sail and all of our aircraft fly through, that it's safe to do so and it's free and open. You protect that. You hold it open. And that's the direction that we're going. It's a little bit different role than the last 15, 20 years for the Marine Corps, which has been largely focused on the Middle East because that's what our country needed us to do. but our unique contribution to national security and regional stability is a naval expeditionary force.
Is that something Japan should be looking into?
We already are. I think the partnership between the Rapid Deployment Brigade in its nascency in the last 2 or 3 years and 3 MEF down in Okinawa has been, I don't know a better example of that. Exchanging people back and forth, learning lessons very rapidly, and us sharing with Japanese self-defense leaders what we learned as an amphibious force, I think altogether helped them grow very quickly and establish a capability much faster than most people would have expected. Would never have happened without a very close, long partnership that's been there for decades, right? It's a phenomenal team. If I could, just not a part of your question, but you remind me of a last part that's not really visible from here, sitting in Tokyo. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, Sergeant Major and I went down to North Carolina because we have a contingent of Marines in North Carolina. While we were there, we went to a squadron hangar in North Carolina where our training squadron is for MV-22 Ospreys. On purpose, to go see our Marines, but also to go see your self-defense force members, because you have a detachment of pilots and crewmen and mechanics who are part of the squadron there flying your aircraft in North Carolina. I thought when I went down there, my impression before I got there was that we had allowed the self-defense force to use a portion of a hangar, an aircraft hangar, to park the aircraft, to work on them, to fly from. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. They are all mixed in one squadron. The Japanese mechanics working on U.S. aircraft, U.S. Marines working on Japanese aircraft. We're flying together in formations. I was amazed. You won't see that very many places around the world. It's an integrated squadron. Really proud to be there. But they will be, as Sergeant Major said yesterday, they will be very proud when they can bring those aircraft here and fly them here. They're very proud to represent you. They're doing a great job. But you don't see it, so I just try to paint a picture for you. You have every reason to be proud of them. They're doing a great job. Yes, ma'am.
I want to follow up on the Korea-Japan question. And you said that there's a common focus so that you're not that concerned. The diplomats are doing all the talking. But there's a lot of concern because Japan and Korea are the biggest alliance partners for the United States. Do you have indication that all 3 of them can fly in formation as well as the self-defense forces in the U.S. did? Can you elaborate a little bit on why you are so confident? And also, would you want the diplomats, especially maybe the president, to get more involved or engaged? Is there a way that we could push, the better resolvement of these issues?
Thanks, ma'am. To be accurate, I never said that I was not concerned. We are. What I did say is we have a common focus on an assessment of what the near and long-term threat are, but absolutely we should all be concerned when part of an alliance, any part of any alliance, has some challenges. I am confident that the right leaders are talking. I am confident that we all share a common view of the threat to stability in this region. Those are things that I am confident in. Our country team, which I met with yesterday, is very focused on working together with both countries. We have a unified view of what threatens stability in this region. What I can do is make sure that our forces are ready, make sure that our forces are partnered with both countries. That's my priority. What else? Sir.
As you know, the other government is trying to revision the constitution to stipulate the self-defense forces on it. What is the official American government's position on this issue?
I didn't discuss that yesterday with the country team. And to be frank, I don't know. I think that's a great question to ask our embassy, even if they have one. It didn't come up in our conversation yesterday, though. What else is on your mind? Yes. Oh, please. I mean, there may be an answer. I just don't know it. I would tell you if I knew.
Do
But,
you have plans to visit Korea?
yes.
Today?
In the next couple days, yes, correct. Hmm.
Next couple of days, not today.
Not today. But during this trip, absolutely. Yes.
So did you say you're going to Okinawa
Mhm.
today? And can you tell who you're going to see involved?
I'll visit with the Marine leaders in Okinawa. I'll go to see Hinoko and the Fatema replacement facility. I'll see Fatema, which is where we'll be when we get down there. Basically, visit with the Marines all up and down Okinawa as much as possible and listen to their concerns, listen to what I have to do as a commandant and a sergeant major to support them. Mhm.
Are you going to see any political leaders, including the governor of Okinawa?
I don't believe so on this trip, no. Yes, ma'am.
Are you satisfied with the size of the presence of the Marines here in Japan and Korea? And is there a chance, given the tensions down in Okinawa, that part of the Marine presence could be moved off of Okinawa to a different part of Japan?
There's the agreement that a couple of you all have mentioned about realignment of forces in the Pacific as part of an agreed-to program between our two countries. As far as the level of force of the Marines in this part of the world, I think there is no plan for us to reduce the size of 3MEF. In fact, the priority of 3MEF among the three will grow. I think you'll also see an increased focus from forces in the United States, Marine forces in the United States on this region so that they become more familiar with it and operate out here on a more frequent basis. I think no plans to reduce the size of 3MEF. We are executing an agreed-to program with the U.S. and Japan on a realignment. And I think the third part, you will see an increased level of participation of Marine forces, especially out of 1MEF in California, in the coming years. Sir?
You mentioned that the Japanese buying the F-35Bs. So they're also converting the two big flat tops to take the F-35Bs. Before Japan gets its F-35Bs, I think the idea is that the U.S. Marines would be flying their F-35Bs off the Japanese flat tops, lily padding from those. How much of a difference does that make for the way that you operate in the region if you have those two flat tops that can then can combine into your own operations?
Yesterday, when we met with the Maritime Self-Defense Force leadership, we did discuss that for a while, and they have a very it's an initial plan of a step-by-step progress the way you just laid it out. I think I'll just talk broad terms operationally. A distributed maritime naval force, which is what you're sort of hinting at, is the direction that the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps are headed. In that regard, you link that, a distributed maritime naval sort of construct, you link that with a very powerful partnership with very high-end capabilities. Now you're able to operate off of each other's vessels in the way you just described. In other words, the end game, the goal should be that it doesn't matter if he or I are pilots and we're F-35 pilots, we have the flexibility to operate off of anybody who's flying F-35s and have an F-35 capable ship. And we can land there, get refueled, rearm, go back and fly again. That's the end goal. Where JSDF pilots can land on a U.S. ship, U.S. Marine pilots can land on a JS or the Maritime Self-Defense Force ship. Now it takes many steps to get there, of course, but that's where that's the goal. Why is that so powerful? Because it opens up a whole lot of options that you don't have if you have to launch from one ship and come back to that ship. Once you open up multiple ships and then you add in expeditionary advanced bases ashore, now you got lots of options. Now it's very difficult for an adversary to target you. And just the flexibility that adds, being able to operate from ashore, a shorter airstrip than an F-35A would or C, a remote airstrip somewhere, or a ship, boy, now your options are wide open. That's where we're headed.
In terms of the timeline, when do you expect that?
I think listening to the Maritime Self-Defense Force leaders yesterday, they have built into their long-term budgets the funding, the resources that they are going to request to do that, to make the modifications to ships, to get the certifications along the way for their aircraft, for our aircraft. That was my understanding yesterday. They have a plan, but they have to work it through the normal process of funding. So I think that will drive the timeline, as it does in all of our countries, what they can get. You have any? I don't know if you have any better insight.
Laid in funding considerations, and it will have to work its way through that process, and then build a timeline based on the amount of resources that are accorded each period.
The good thing, though, is because we've been operating from our F-35Bs from ships for a year and a half now, 2 years,
Yes,
a
sir.
year and a half, something like that.
Yes,
We're
sir.
learning very quickly also. So when Japan gets ready to start flying off of their ships, we will have already shared everything we've learned. They will not be starting from step one. And we talked some about that yesterday.
So maybe within the next couple of years?
I don't know. They laid out yesterday described a 10-year plan with intermediate steps all the way along. So I think their funding availability will drive the timeline. They sounded like they would rather have it sooner than later.
Sure.
We would too.
So let me explain why timeline is matter for us, for Japanese defense forces, for Japanese public broadly. Now, so some people say, or will say that the Japanese ship should accommodate Japanese fighter jet F-35B first, not the U.S. Marine Corps one. So that timeline is why we so concerned about the timeline of the modification of the ships and an accommodation of the U.S. Marine Corps or aircraft with that new fabricated ships. So could you comment more on the timeline? This, I mean, is it possible for U.S. Marine Corps F-35B would be the first aircraft landing on the DBC Eastport that would be modified to accommodate the F-35B?
I don't know. I know your question, but the announcement of the selection of F-35B was within the last 7 days. So expecting a very detailed timeline of when are your aircraft, when are their aircraft going to land off of that. I don't think yet even the decision, that was the decision to procure, but the amount and the timeline is a function within the Japanese budgeting cycle. But my impression yesterday is the self-defense force wants to move as quickly as the government will fund it. I don't know if they want to move quickly.
So,
Yeah. I can't tell you in what sequence, in what year. It'll be driven by the funding.
So you mentioned the common threat from China to us, to the countries. What is particularly threatening to our forces in the region, as much
Yeah.
as much as you can say?
More accurately, what I said was we view the threat of China in a common way as destabilizing for the region. Now, there's a subset of that, of course, what we each perceive as a threat to our country. But the common view is that the actions of China and the direction that they're headed is destabilizing the region.
Is there any major change in their behavior in the region?
I think all you have to do is look at the last 3, 4, 5 years, as someone mentioned, the activities in the South China Sea, the actions that they've taken in various countries to coerce their governments into accepting types of loans that none of us would sign up for our families, but are offered in a way that in a very short period of time they take control of the resources in that country. That type of coercive behavior is, in the last 3 or 4 years, is reflective as anything I know of. There are flights, as noted before, where they are flying in other countries' airspace without permission, pretty broad violation of that. Declaring exclusive zones around features that don't exist in violation of the UNCLOS. Those are, to me, very clear indicators that they're not accepting of what the region believes is norms, is normal behavior, accepted behavior.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have time for one more question.
I have one more question.
Yes.
So I think Secretary Esper said that he wants to deploy mid-range or short-range missiles in the area. Is that strategically important? I know you're not going to make the decision, but strategically, how is?
He's my boss, right? I mean, no. Is it strategically important in the overall framework, you mean?
Yes, and in your operations as well.
I think I won't, of course, I would never speak for him. He can speak clearly better than I can. But where we must push back on China and make sure that the capability, collectively, the capability that we have will deter bad behavior is so important. Any weakness, any seam is a risk, and we should try to close those gaps as quickly as we can. Where a country like China believes they have an advantage, believes they do, we need to counter that. And where there are defensive measures or offensive that contribute to overall stability, that's what I think that's what he was referring to. All so important for the long-term stability here. He and other leaders, and you're all leaders, your leaders have said the same. Countries like China have benefited from the 70 years of relative calm in this region that was paid for by security alliances like ours. They grew on the backside of that. And now they want to turn that upside down and define it in a way that's destabilizing. That's not the way to go. But they got to where they are in some portion because of the alliance and the security that we provided. And now they want to invert that. That's not acceptable. It's not free and open. Well, let me finish, if that's okay, by saying thanks again. And I mean genuinely thanks. In a democracy, these kind of discussions are part of the strength, right? Having your ability to ask questions, mine, not knowing even your questions, but an honest answer. And where we don't know the answer, we'll get back to you, really powerful. So thank you for this morning. I'm here as much in a listening mode as anything. I probably, like you, my parents told me there's a reason why you have 2 ears and only 1 mouth. So we learn. Sergeant Major and I are here to learn and to listen. So thanks for your questions. Thanks for your comments this morning. Okay, and I hope I'll be back pretty soon. So hopefully we'll get a chance to link up again. And thanks again. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to meet you. Thanks. Did I just say thanks to each one of you? Thank you, man. Good to meet you. Great to meet you. Thank you. I don't know how you all keep all your deadlines. You have a harder job, I think, in some ways than I do. You always have to go from one place to the next. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thanks. Great to meet you. Thanks again. See you next time. Thanks.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so I do have his PAO's contact information, so I'll go ahead and pass those out. That way if you have any specific follow-on questions or any clarification and comments.